بسم الله والابن والروح القدس الإله الواحد آمين.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy and blessed to be with you this evening. We had a wonderful meeting last night with the youth. I think it was a vibrant meeting. We talked about being bold in today's world, and it's always a blessing to come and be amongst you. It is a blessing. I mean this sincerely. I was talking to my wife last night, and I said, what a wonderful vibe that I get from this wonderful ministry, to be in your presence, to be in the presence of His Grace Bishop Arseni, who's very dear to my heart, and the fathers, and it's an honor to be with you. And I would love to make this a habit, God willing. What are we discussing for the next 2 sessions? As you see on the screen, challenges of our time. So in the first session, we will discuss the challenges. What are the challenges? If I speak all in English, will that be okay? No Arabic. Good, thank you. Okay, so because that would be a challenge for me. So the challenge of our time, what is it? Intellectual challenge, moral challenge, cultural challenge. That's the first session. But I cannot leave you with, here's the problem, and then leave. What is the solution? So the second session would be how to equip and arm our children to address the challenge. Simple. Do we have challenges? You better believe we do. I tried my best not to reflect the American-Canadian challenge onto the European cultural challenge. I tried my best to dig into the European cultural challenge. They're not very different, by the way. We can call it the Western challenge, okay? And thank you, Marina, for helping me with the specific challenges that we are facing, or as Christians, we're facing in this world. There are several, over 20 of them, but I selected just 4, and after talking to Marina, we reduced it to just 3, okay? I'll share with you the 3 challenges. First of all, religious pluralism. I'll explain what that is, okay? Second, moral relativism. These are cultural, philosophical, academic, ideological challenges, okay? And then the third one, which we will spend more time on, gender identity, gender and sexuality. And we're going to get into the transgender movement, the LGBTQ and pronouns and all of this wonderful stuff, or all of this stuff, okay? So I had atheism as one of them, ilhad. But because we have limited time, I took it out. And maybe next time we can discuss atheism, next time we meet, okay? Does that sound good? Sound like a plan? Now I want you to engage with me. Last night I had to push your children or the youth to engage with me. I hope you can interrupt me, ask questions, objections, whatever that is, engage with me as we continue. So before I begin with those challenges, I would like to mention an observation that I have observed dealing with or serving youth for over the past 3 decades or so. It seems to me that our children live in a bipolar world. You know what I mean by that? Bipolar world. It seems to me that our children have 2 worlds they live in. One world is the world at home, the world at church. The other world is the world at school, with social media, with friends. And it seems that these 2 worlds are so far apart. And it seems that our children suffer from, multiple personality disorder or schizophrenia or some bipolar disorder, because they are immersed in school with social media, with friends, and they absorb all this information, yet at home and at church, it is something very different. Do you see that? Do you feel that? Yes? Now, how can we bridge that gap so that there is no contention no what you call in psychology cognitive dissonance. What do I do? Do I belong to this world or do I belong to that world? And that's what we will discuss eventually. So let's pick the first one, religious pluralism. It's pretty common in the West, in the US and Canada, and also in Europe in general, specifically in the Netherlands. Pluralism simply says, the word plural means many. In Arabic, it's called madhab at-ta'addudiyya. Okay? Pluralism basically says all religions worship the same God. Christians call this God Jesus. Muslim calls this God Allah. Buddhists call this God Nirvana, and so on. We all worship the same God. Why bother? Why say, I'm right, you're wrong? Can we just all get along and be tolerant to one another? Because this seems to be politically correct. Do you guys have that expression here? Political correctness? This is politically correct. I teach the youth this phenomena. Whenever you hear the words politically correct, most likely it's biblically corrupt. If it's politically correct, it's biblically corrupt. Anyways, so this is an ideology that has swept the academic world. On college and university campuses, you can't say Christianity is the only truth. They will stone you. But if you say Christians, Muslim, atheists, Buddhists, all of us, we just worship the same God. Can we just all hold hands and worship the same God? And it sounds better. But is it real? Is it true? Can we refute and prove it false? And this is what pluralism is all about. And last couple of years when I was here with you, I showed this picture and I said, why did I leave Christianity out of this picture? Specifically, intentionally, I took Christianity out of this image. Why? Which makes Christianity unique and distinct, because it's the opposite direction. All the religions of the world, and I did study comparative religions for almost 8 years, and I can tell you, every single religion is going bottoms up. Only Christianity, where you have top-down approach. God came to us rather than man trying to search for God. Anyways, so pluralism, here I got some excerpts from current news, how pluralism is very common here in the Netherlands. Why is it popular? Because basically, you don't have to have any stance that's divisive. You're neutral. You're not making any offensive comments. You're not saying this is right, this is wrong. And it safeguards you from being labeled judgmental. Because if you say this is wrong, you're judging now. And also, it aligns with diversity, equity, inclusion, and so on. And that's why our children, this is what they are learning in the university and in schools, is that heaven is inclusive. In other words, and I get this question from wherever I go, in the Middle East, Australia, here, Canada, everywhere I go, I get this question. Will my good friend who lives a moral life, will he not go to heaven simply because he doesn't or she doesn't believe in Jesus? That doesn't make sense. They don't cheat, they don't lie, they live a good life, they are so well behaved, they do all good deeds. Are you telling me they're not going to go to heaven because they don't believe in Jesus? That's too exclusive. That's too narrow-minded. Do you all get this question? I am sure you do. Now, that's all about pluralism. Why? Because if inclusion and diversity is good on earth, then inclusion and diversity must be good in heaven. You see? It's an ideology. All is good. Just be good. You don't need to worship la Jesus, wala Muhammad, wala. Just be a good person. You'll go to heaven. You see? Now, what do you say? Now think critically, or critical thinking. What would you say to someone who says you don't need to believe in Jesus to go to heaven? Or when someone asks you this question, will my good friend not go to heaven simply because they don't believe in Jesus? What would you say? I want to ask you. What would you? What would you? Forget the book. You.
I believe that God won't open his arms for my friends. I just refuse to believe that because I have
Speak in the mic so we can hear you.
Yeah, I have friends who are gay, I have friends who are Muslim, I have friends who are everywhere. And I do believe they will go to heaven because I refuse that my lovely God will say, oh no, you're not lucky enough to be raised as a Muslim, so God will shut the door for you.
Excellent. Okay. Now, I beg to differ, but I'll tell you why I differ.
Yeah,
I'll tell you why. I appreciate your opinion. I appreciate your honesty as well. And the reason why you're saying this, I can tell you, because you have a heart that's compassionate towards others. And I can see that. God also has a heart who's compassionate towards others. Even more than you. Because he died for them, you didn't. So he wants everyone to go to heaven even more than you do. I agree with you. However, here's what I would ask. What do you mean by heaven? Simple question. That's not what we believe heaven is. As Christians, what is heaven? As Christians, what is heaven? Simple question. Before I even answer the question, I don't want to answer the question. I would like to ask a question for the questioner. Will my good friend not go to heaven simply because he doesn't believe in Jesus? Don't answer. Just ask. What do you mean by heaven?
Well, people see it black and white. People
As
see
Christians, what is heaven?
What is heaven?
It's simple answer.
Eternal life with God.
That's it. With the Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah. Excellent. So with that understanding, it's all logical. With this understanding, why would I deny Christ on earth, yet I want to be with him in heaven? If your heaven is milk and honey and all kind of stuff, enjoy it, for sure. But my heaven is to be in the presence of Christ. So that's what I'm trying to say. You can go to the heaven that you fabricate, you construct in your mind. Of course, there's a lot of heaven fabrications, but my heaven is to be with Christ. So that is to say, I can't, as a matter of fact, if Christ would to compel you to go to heaven, غصب عنك, that heaven will be held to you because you rejected him. You don't want him. And here's what I would like to share with you in addition to that. God doesn't deal with those who reject him the same way we do. We could say, hey, listen, I gave you life and death, heaven and hell. That's one of the verses in the Bible. Choose life. But if you choose hell or choose death, you know, in Arabic we say, zambak ala gambak. Yani, you brought it unto yourself. Khalas. You decided you reject me. We may act this way, God doesn't. God will come after you once, twice, 3 times until your last breath on earth. He will keep knocking at the door of your heart. Because I know, according to the Bible, he wants all to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. يريد الجميع يخلصون وإلى معرفة الحق يقبلون. Okay? So he wants us all with him. But if we continue to say no to him, is he going to twist my arm and just force me to go to heaven? No. So the question here is that heaven is being with Christ. Christ is what makes heaven heaven. So I see your point and I appreciate it. Yes, God is loving. And because he's loving, compassionate, he's run after each person his own way. His own way, he's going to knock at the heart of every single human being. So, pluralism, what else? How can we prove, logically speaking, with philosophical thinking, how can we prove this is false? And the reason why I'm sharing this with you so that you can share that with your children. as well. Well, here's what Aristotle said. There's a law in philosophy, قانون في الفلسفة اسمه the law of non-contradiction, قانون عدم التناقض, the law of non-contradiction. What does it say? Mutually exclusive or contradictory statements cannot be true at the same time. It's a law of philosophy, which simply means, as an analogy, today is what? Today is Saturday in Amsterdam. Can today be Saturday and Tuesday at the same time? Of course not. It's either Saturday or Tuesday. Why is that? Because these are contradictory statements. However, I can say today is Saturday in Amsterdam, today is sunny. Are these contradicting statements? They're differing statements, but they're not contradicting. It can be Saturday and sunny, but it cannot be Saturday and Tuesday. You see? So contradictory statements cannot be true at the same time. Well, do you think all religions have contradictory truth claims? You better believe it does, or they do. I'll give you just a sample. Islam and Christianity. Who is Christ in Islam? Just a prophet. Who is Christ in Christianity? God incarnate. God in the flesh. They cannot be both true at the same time. As a matter of fact, thinking logically now, it's more likely both are wrong than to say both are right. Do you see what I'm saying? It's more like, I'm not saying they're both wrong. I'm saying it's more likely philosophically to say both are wrong. It's more likely to say it's not Saturday or Tuesday, maybe it's Friday, but not to say both are right. Salvation. Well, what is salvation in Islam? You know, hasanat, sayyat, good deeds have to outweigh the bad deeds. That's how you go to their heaven. Now, what is salvation in Christianity? Active, dynamic, working faith in the Lord Jesus Christ with the Eucharist and baptism and repentance. That is salvation. Now, heaven. In Islam, heaven is sensual. In Christianity, heaven is spiritual, being with Christ. So they both cannot be right. You have to make up your decision and your mind. How do you do that? To study religions. That's why one philosopher said, those who say all religions worship the same God do not know religions. Because if you dig deep, you'll know they contradict. Confucianism, Hinduism, Buddhism, they all contradict one another. All right. So have you seen this sign before? No? It's all over the West, US and Canada, coexist. All these are symbols of all the religions. Let's just say all worship the same God. I put another sign in front of it. Contradict. That's why they cannot all be right. And we need to teach our children, it sounds good that we're all worshiping the same God. It is illogical to say so. Okay? I spent a little too much time on the first one. The second challenge, yes ma'am. لا عشان نسمعك, so we can hear you, so we can all hear you.
So she has a son who's 8 years old, and he is now being confronted with people from different religions, and they are telling him like, but it's also God, it's all the same God. Yeah, so for this age, for the age of 8, when they are told like, but I also believe in God, it's the same God, how can you explain that to a child of 8? How far can you go with explaining this on an 8-year-old's level?
Excellent question. Now, not very much different from what I said, but you just have to speak to their level. In other words, here are 2 ways you can explain dense, difficult concepts like this to little children, 7. And by the way, they're very advanced in their thinking, not like 8 years old. Right. But I would, there's no reason why you cannot explain this law of non-contradiction in his own. You don't have to say the law of non-contradiction, they will get lost. But you can say, listen, Habibi, have an analogy. What is the color of this water? Well, that's not a good analogy. Okay. What is the color of this book? It's blue. Can it be blue and red in the same time? No. Why? Well, because it doesn't make sense. Well, you know what? This religion, and so on and so forth. So explain with analogies, illustrations with the child, they will begin to get the concept. Something else I advise you all to do, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the solution, is that how do you know true from false or truth from falsehood? How do I train my child to discern, يميز, between truth and falsehood? Do you know how? I will give you an example. When you go work at a bank as a teller, how do they train you detect counterfeit money, fake? Don't hold it too. Okay. How do they train you to be able to detect fake money? Anyone knows? Do they give you fake money to see how it feels? No. They train you for hours on feeling what? Good money, real money. And they train you so you can get a feel of what the real, authentic, good money feels like. So that when you get a fake note, you'll be able to what? Say, that doesn't feel right. So how do you discern truth from falsehood? To learn the truth, you'll detect falsehood. To learn the good money and practice feeling the good money, you'll know what the fake money looks like and feels like. So how do you train your child to know this doesn't sound right? To train them on what sounds right. Do you see? All right. Let's move on. Moral relativism. اللي هو بالعربي اسمه I don't know. Oh, النسبية. Thank you. مذهب النسبية. Okay? I had to learn these expressions. Anyways, what is moral relativism? Let me give you a definition. When it comes to moral issues, يعني right and wrong, good and bad, there are no objective right or wrong answers. Morality is up to you. You say what is right, I say what is right. بلاش you and I. The situation, الموقف, will determine that is right and that is wrong. بس ما فيش حاجة there's nothing objective. That's on me and you. That's moral relativism. Basically, the right way and the wrong way are in the basket, the garbage. Now it's whatever way you want. You can have it whatever way. You say what is right, you say what is wrong. I'll give you some statements that we hear in the university as well. No one has the right to tell me what is right and what is wrong. You don't have the right to tell me that. I determine that. This may be right for you, but it's not right for me. That's relativism in action. What's right depends on the situation. That's relativism in action. As a result, and I shared this with your children, or not your children, the youth last night. I shared this with them. As a result, the Oxford Junior Dictionary drops Christian words. One of them is sin. Actually, I have a few more words here. Bishop, chapel, disciple, minister, sin, and devil have been all dropped from the dictionary. So if you go to the dictionary, the Oxford Junior Dictionary, مش هتلاقوا, you're not going to find the word sin or even bishop. That doesn't even exist. How unfortunate is that? Now, the outcome, and I shared this with you last night. The outcome when you get rid of sin, because everything is relative, morally speaking, then here's the outcome. A vice like lust will become sensuality. Pornography will become art. Homosexuality will become alternative lifestyle. Anger will be being honest with your emotions. Greed will be pursuing your dream. Transgenderism will be being authentic to yourself. This is what happens when you get rid of sin. This is what happens when morality becomes relative. All right. And if there's no sin, then there's no what? Hell. Because our God is I was talking to Abuna, I think I was talking to Utsak Abuna last night about the concept of hell is completely eradicated, deleted from our culture. Hell sounds so harsh. God is so loving and so nice. فيش حاجة اسمها hell. Well, because there's no sin, there's no hell. One author by the name of Elizabeth Gilbert said, there's no such a thing in the universe as hell, except maybe in our terrible or terrified minds. And if there's no hell, then we will replace the question, what's morally good, with what feels good. So now, what determines right and wrong? My feelings. I feel that I am a woman trapped in a man's body. Then I must be that. I feel such and such. Then that must be true. And if you listen to we have a lot of sitcom and TV shows and all of that. It revolves around my feelings are. Follow your heart. That seems to be the name of the game. All right, number 3 challenge, gender and sexuality. Before I get into that, I would like to ask you, any comments or questions on pluralism, we all worship the same God, how we proved that wrong, and relativism, how morality is relative to the person or the circumstance. Any questions on these two?
There's also a Menti in the group app. We shared it. If you want to ask your question anonymously, you can also add it in the... use the link in the group chat.
Thank you, Marina. And is this relevant to you all? I just want to make sure that I'm talking about something that is completely out of touch with what you're dealing with. Do you all deal with these things? Yes. Okay, good. Oh, okay.
I think a lot of people, that if I look around, that we have dealt with this ourselves. I used to say in school, like, I'm with one foot in my Egyptian and Coptic, because an Egyptian culture is not my Coptic Christian culture, so I'm with one step in that, and the other one is my Dutch one. The only difference, and that's what you started off with, is that we grew up in a very small society. Our Coptic society was small. It was all very overzichtelijk. It was very clear. كله كان واضح. وكله صغير وإحنا جروب صغير. And even school, I was raised and I still live there in a very small village. I always call it a farmer's village. And everyone was, we didn't have social media. We didn't have a lot of influence from outside. Everyone was kept in his value. So if we said, well, okay, you believe in your God, I believe in my God, that was respected and everyone could just do whatever they want. But now, كله بيخبط في بعضه. And I think that's the difference, what I feel like raising my children now, just like Rosalie just said of her 8-year-old, I have the same, that my child is doubting God just because already, while we were in our teenage years, we were doubting stuff, and we got the confirmation in church because we were small and it was all limited, and Bassilios was paying a lot of attention to us, and that made us strong in our faith, and we kept strong. But what I feel is very hard now is that my child in a much younger age is already questioning so many things, and it's like you said, like use simple symbols or examples to explain it, but I feel like that is very hard and it's not accepted very easy like we used to accept so easy when Abuna said so. Right. We believed, we accepted, and it made us stronger in our faith. Yes. And that's why we're still here, and that's why I'm afraid my children, how to keep them so strong that when they're my age, they're still here as well.
Very good. Thank you for sharing this experience with me. I've learned quite a bit from what you said. Don't be afraid, though. Don't be afraid, because they are not your children. They are God's children, okay? Remember that. But you are a steward on them. That's why, my very dear friends, it is not easy nowadays in this very challenging society just to say they attend Sunday school once a month, once a week for an hour. I'm happy. No, don't be happy. Because there is a challenge, which means, as a parent, I do have kids, by the way, and I live in San Francisco. It's hard, let's just put it that way, okay? And it's, you need to be able to parent almost on a daily basis with them. Once you anchor them with the roots in the church, don't be afraid. My dad was a priest. He's in heaven now, but he was a priest. And he used to have this saying all the time. I'm not sure if this is common or not. بس في الصعيد يعني he would say ادهن ابنك بالزيت وارميه ورا الحيط. In other words, anchor them in the faith. Don't worry. I believe the home is the root of everything. The home. You can be in the worst culture ever, but if the home is anchored and founded on Christian principles, don't be afraid. So there's a challenge. We need to work as parents together, and we have communities together. We help each other. And by the way, I'm not going to leave you like this. In the second session, I have some resources for you. So I have some useful websites. They're all in English, though. I have some websites on raising my child in the fear of God when they are 3, 5, 8, until they're 20. What to say, when to say it, how to say it, to raise them in the church. Yes, ma'am.
I admire that you're saying when you anchor your child in faith, then you don't need to worry about it. But there are many examples of Christian parents who has kids who have abandoned the faith. So what is anchoring then exactly?
Well, what is anchoring is that, and I don't want to look at the exceptions. Because the exceptions may actually make us feel discouraged. And here's the son of a wonderful servant. Look where he is now. Look where she is now. Then you know what? I'm not going to do my part. Don't look at the exceptions. Do your part, knowing that they are not yours, they are his, and you are just doing your part as a parent. What is your part? Do you read the scriptures with them? Do you explain the faith with them? Explain the faith rather than, here is the difference between generations in Egypt, when I say 30, 40, 50 years ago, and nowadays. Back then, when I grew up, when I was a little kid in Egypt, we had what we call بالعربي مسلمات. You know what that is? This is what it is. Don't ask questions. فاهمين قصدي؟ بالعربي لا نقاش لا جدال في الحاجات دي. Don't ask questions. This is our faith. We can't raise our kids like that anymore. We can't do that because they will challenge us. Why do I believe that this and this is true? You have to explain. So for you to explain, you have to know yourself. You see? So it's more important for us to be equipped so that we can equip our children. That's why apologetics is extremely important nowadays. Archpeter, I'm sure you agree with me. Apologetics اللي هو الدفاعيات. Asking, like you mentioned, talking to my kids about the existence of God. I'll tell you a story. I was traveling from San Francisco to Los Angeles. It's a 5-hour drive. And I had my son with me. He was 7 years old at the time. And we were driving for 5 hours. I wanted to use this time productively. So you know what? I asked him this question. Hey, Jonathan, have you ever doubted that God exists? He was shocked I asked him this question. He said, Dad, how can you ask me that? I said, I'm serious. Do you doubt that God exists? He said, wow, well, actually, sometimes I do. I said, good, let's talk about it. Not good, but let's talk about it. It's important. Before they even ask us, we ask them. عارفة بالعربي باسمها انكشوا. You know what I mean? Do you speak Arabic? Okay. So we have to. But imagine if my son says, yes, I had some doubts that God exists. And if I say, oh, I had doubts too, then there's a bigger problem. So you have to know the answer and then explain to them. So my dear friends, again, I cannot stress enough. This is what I mean, this is answering the question how to anchor them. Talking to them about essentials of our faith. Why do I believe Jesus Christ is the truth? Why? Because the Bible says so? Forget the Bible. Don't talk about the Bible. Talk about logic. Talk about history. Talk about evidence. Why I believe Christianity is true. Why I believe Jesus resurrected from the dead. Talk to your child. Show him some stuff. Make sure they understand what you're explaining to them. That's what you need to do. It's not a walk in the park, easy, like back in the days. It's a challenging. Yes, sir.
Well, actually, I grew up in a pretty conservative Protestant bubble, and we were pelted with stuff like this pretty much every week. Like, this is why pluralism is wrong. This is why moral relativism is wrong. This is why we believe in God. But especially when your children become teenagers, it becomes very obvious to them that sometimes life in the church isn't very attractive compared to like a worldly lifestyle. And I remember for myself, being like 22 years old, yeah, that was pretty much obvious to me. And it's not true, but how do I communicate that?
Yeah, we can just switch mics real quick. Thank you. Yes, it's an excellent question. How do you communicate that? Well, see, again, I'll tell you what I do as a parent, okay? You can explain to them one way or another based on God-given wisdom, okay, how to explain that to them. That this life, while it may seem attractive, it will leave you empty. And I have examples for you, and you share with them some examples. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of examples I can share with you now on pursuing the life of sensual pleasure, partying, going out, drugs, and this and all of that. And of course, the Western world allows for all of that, and it seems far more attractive. But you eat from it, you do it, and you feel what? Emptier than before. Emptier and emptier, because this will never satisfy. So explain to them based on their age. If they're teenagers, they can understand hard concepts. And you can tell them the following. Here's a concept I'll share with you. Nothing less than yourself can ever satisfy yourself. Remember this principle. Nothing less than yourself can ever satisfy yourself. Only what is greater than yourself can satisfy yourself. Now find who that is. Everything in this world is less than you. Everything. That's why, and you can talk about the Samaritan woman, for example. She was hungry for more and more and more. Now, when she found the water of truth, or the source of truth, rather, she was fulfilled and satisfied. So, guide them to real fulfillment, real satisfaction at that age. Okay, and I have some examples I would love to share with you after we finish. Like actual examples I can share with you to share with them. All right. Can you keep me honest with, so let me know when I need to. Okay. So can we talk about gender and sexuality a little bit? Because I think that's pretty relevant. Shkira? And I will just talk, the LGBTQIA+. And by the way, as I said, I live in San Francisco, so I'm very familiar with all of these things. But I'm going to talk about one letter of the acronym, the T. Okay, and then we'll leave the rest for another time. Transgenderism, because this is now becoming like a pandemic, right? Is it also in the Netherlands? Okay, good. So what I would like to share with you is first, how to understand that transgenderism is illogical. Illogical. I'm not talking about the Bible says it's wrong, or put that aside for now. How it's illogical, so that you can explain that to your child when they ask you questions. And then the second portion is how to talk to our children about transgenderism. ماشي, I'll try to be concise and brief عشان خاطر, for the sake of time. So, I'll share with you what Dr. Albert Mohler, he's a very famous Christian apologist and preacher. He said, the transgender revolution represents one of the most difficult pastoral challenges that churches in this generation will face. I agree with him 100%. 100%. Because it speaks to the core of what it means to be a human being. The core of who you are. Are you made in the image of God, or are you made in the image of yourself? Okay? Now, gender identity, okay, we'll skip that for a second. What are the consequences of gender identity problems, gender dysphoria, and transgenderism, and homosexuality, and all of these things? Well, you have broken marriages, broken lives, broken families, broken societies, and all of that. So how do you respond philosophically, logically, to the transgender ideology? Let me share with you 5 points, very quickly. 5 points that you can share with when you're asked. Number 1, our bodies prove that there are 2 genders. Our biology proves that there are 2 genders. That's the first point. What do I mean by that? Well, we can either produce sperms or eggs, nothing as a third option that has not been found yet, okay? I don't think it'll ever be found, but just to say the case. Yes, there are humans that cannot produce either or, but that's due to disease. That's an incapacity, not a third category. Our bodies prove that you can either produce this or this. Now, tell me, is there a third option? No, there isn't. So our body proves that. If I am a biological man, think with me. If I am a biological man, but I think I am a woman, I must have an idea of what a man is and what a woman is to recognize my problem. Think again. If I'm a biological man, but I think I am a woman, I must know what a man is and what a woman is to see the problem. I must also know what a man is, what a woman is, to make the transition. What are you transitioning? I asked, what are you transitioning to? A woman. So you know what a woman is? Yes. What are you transitioning to? A man. Have you ever seen the documentary, What is a Woman? By Matt Walsh? Yes, you've seen this. It's a very excellent documentary. I loved it. And I shared it with all my conferences that I go to. I would love if you all have a time to maybe share it with everyone. What is a woman? People don't know what a woman is. Well, of course, because if you know what it is, then you're not making a transition anymore. All right. Here's a question. Saying that there are more than 2 genders proves, or is not based on objective design, but it's based on subjective feelings, mental conditions. You can invent any gender you want. It doesn't mean it actually exists. Second point, so our makeup, our biology proves that there are only 2 genders. Second point, this is my favorite one, psychology versus biology. If I were to summarize transgenderism in one sentence, I would say it's a psychological problem that people are trying to fix it with biological methods. It's a psychology trying to be fixed by biology. And you can't do that. Now, think with me. When biology and psychology are mismatched, my biology says I'm a man, but my psychology says I'm a woman. Okay? Why do we think changing the body instead of changing the mind is the way to the solution? I'm just asking that simple question. Why do you think changing the body, not changing the mind, is the way to the solution? Can I give you a proof? When I have an anorexic, عارفين anorexic اللي هم مين؟ Anorexia اللي هم they have a disease they eat, and what's anorexia, Marina?
Restrict yourselves.
Eetstoornis.
Thank you. So if I have an anorexic child and they think that they are big and overweight, do I say, yes, you are overweight? If I have a little girl that she thinks she's a mermaid, do I say, yes, I'll throw you in the ocean? You don't do that. What is the problem? It's a mental, psychological problem. So why don't we do the same thing with transgenderism? Why do you think fixing the body is the way to the solution rather than fixing the mind? Number 3, is gender really fluid? You know what I mean by fluid? There's a spectrum, okay? Gender fluidity. Well, gender dysphoria, اللي هو mismatch between my psychology and my biology, gender dysphoria would not exist if gender is fluid. Why? Here's my point. Because if they're fluid, it would be impossible to recognize the mismatch between my body and my psychology, between my body and my mind. If it's really fluid, then you wouldn't know there's a problem. Because you could just say, hey, I feel like being a man today. I feel like being a woman tomorrow. And so why do you have to transition? You can just, because it's fluid. But you feel the need to transition, then it's not really fluid. There is a man, there is a woman that you're transitioning to or from. Okay? If men and women were the same, why would you even need to transition? You see? So gender is not really fluid. Number 4. Here's what I get. Well, what about people who are born intersex? You've heard of intersex, that have both sex organs. What about that? Well, do you think this is the same as transgenderism? Absolutely not. It is not the same as transgenderism. People with intersex are people with fully formed sexual organs that attempt, transgenderism are people with fully formed sexual organs that attempt to transition to the opposite sex. Intersex patients, they end up male or female rather than assuming a third non-binary status. So it's a completely different condition. Plus, what is the percentage of those who are born intersex? A very, very small percentage. You cannot say this is the norm, taking an exception, making it the norm. Intersex is a biological condition. Gender dysphoria is a psychological condition. Now, birth defects like intersex birth defect does not prove the norm. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't know if it's a defect if there is no norm to deviate from. An example, should birth defects provide the new standard of behavior for the entire world? Because we say, well, there are people who are intersex, that means we can have transgenders all over. When someone is born deaf, can't hear, do we tell everyone they can never listen to music because it offends the deaf people? Think about it. Of course not. So you cannot use the exception and make it the norm. The last point, but should I not follow my heart? Remember what I told you about feelings? I want to follow my heart. This has been the kind of the moral compass of our children, or follow your heart. And here are some examples. Be your authentic self. You do you, I do me. Dare to live your truth. Follow your heart and make it your decision. Be true to yourself. Find yourself. All of these, by the way, are things that are like mantras, okay, for many of our children. Just follow your feelings in your heart. If it feels good, it must be good. Well, a verse from the scriptures, I tell you, he who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. So the scripture says, do not follow your heart. Do not find yourself. Lose yourself in Christ, and you will find it. Completely different than what the world teaches. Now, many young people who claim to transition, by the way, they change their heart. And I have a lot of statistics that will tell you how many people transitioned from a man to a woman to a man. And then what happened after they've reached a certain stage in their life, they said, oh man, what did I do? And if you watch the documentary, What is the Woman? You'll see a lot of those people that said, I made a mistake, but can you revert this mistake? You're done. And not only that, it's so sad, at least in the US and Canada even more so than the US, that they start with 7, 8, 9 years old children, and their teachers in school even encourage them to discover, to change. See how sad that is? And then they go through the puberty blockers, the hormones and all of that, and they change their body and all this, and then they reach, 16, 17, many of them commit suicide. Many of them go into chronic depression. And I'm not just saying that. Statistics will tell you that that is the case. About 80%, and I have the reference here below, 80% of young teens who experience dysphoria grow out of it by the time they are 18 years old. Now here's a question for you. Why would anyone block nature's cure and remedy and solution to a problem and castrate a child for a feeling that will change anyways? Why would you do that? I call this child abuse. I call this child abuse. A child cannot buy cigarettes or alcohol until they reach 18 years old. A child cannot vote until they reach 18 years old, but they can decide to change their gender when they're 6 years old. That's child abuse. That's Satan at work. We, my dear friends, need to know this challenge and equip our children with this. All right. Are we called to follow our heart? Listen to a wise man in Proverbs said, instead of following your heart, we need to what? Guard your heart. نحفظ القلب. احفظ القلب. احفظه. Okay. Guard your heart. Don't follow your heart. Why? Why? Because there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. في طرق تبدو مستقيمة إنما في آخرها إيه؟ Death. That's why we guard the heart, not follow the heart. All right. تعبت ولا لسه? Can I have just 3 more minutes? How to talk to our children. معلش سامحوني, I took a little longer. 3 more minutes. How to talk to our children very quickly about transgenderism. I have 3 quick points. Number 1, teach them to accept themselves. What do I mean by accept themselves? Raise your daughter to accept her feminine self and not to reject her feminine self, knowing that being a girl is a gift from God. Okay? To teach your children to accept their femininity and masculinity. Raise your son to embrace his masculine self, knowing that a boy is a good gift from God. That's number 1. Teach them to accept themselves. Oops, here's the translation. Number 2, encourage their individuality. Encourage your children are not an extension of you. They have their own individual needs, desires, aspirations, and passions. Encourage that. Meaning, not all men, here's the translation. Not all men are going to act like men, and not all women are going to act like women. Many women may like sports, for example, or like to do a typical cultural stereotype for a man. And many men like to play the piano or cook or do whatever that's cultural stereotypes for women. That's okay. Cultural stereotypes need to be overcome. Be yourself, not be yourself like follow your heart, but encourage your passion, your desire. We don't have to fit in a box. This is what men do. Men don't cry. This is what girls do. Girls don't do, and so on and so forth. That is cultural stereotypes that we need to overcome. Number 3, start early. early. And I'll give you references on when to start and what to say at what stage in their life. Start early. Initiate early sex education at home. And here's an important part. Listen to this point very carefully. Do not project your own wrong, bad, incorrect version of masculinity and femininity onto your child. Because we come with, as parents, with baggage. Don't project, not you, I do. Don't project this baggage onto your child and your perspective of what a man is, what a woman is. Here are some helpful resources. Talking to your child about transgender issues. These are links. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share, Archie Peter and Marina, I'm going to share with both of you those links. They are very helpful and very simple to follow and practical. مش حاجات theoretical, practical. This is what I say, at what age, at what stage, and so on. Very, very important. You can use that. Talking to your child about transgender issues, helping your children with gender identity confusion, healthy childhood sexual development, and reinforcing my child's sexual identity. Very, very helpful resources. All right. Forgive me, this took a long time.